movement. The Ras Tafari movement, it originated in Jamaica. It's considered an African standard religion. Its founder is Marcus Garvey, who prophesied that the coming of a king. His prophecy came true in 1930 when King Haile Selassie was announced emperor of Ethiopia. Rasta claimed that he was the reincarnation of Jah on earth. Today, the Rasta movement has been spread out through much of the world, and the characteristics of the Rastafari include spiritual use of cannabis, rejection of Western society, which they also call Babylon, and Afrocentric social and political views and aspirations. And two brothers, Elinaj, I believe, and Black Fire, that came to help me present. So, do a round of applause.
Hi, my name is Elinaj. I appreciate being here, first of all, sharing this information. I asked myself upon coming here for about the third time or so, how will I present this lecture, looking at each and every experience and asking myself, how can I move into a more disciplined state of reality so that I can bring the information more effectively. And so I'm going to start this one off with a question that was presented to me by Jordan when I met him. He asked me, did the Rastafari movement start out in Africa or in Jamaica? I realized that there are a lot of misconceptions about Rastafari when I do a study and figure out how to approach the lecture. There are a lot of facts and there are a lot of misconceptions. When you ask the question, did it originate in Africa or Jamaica, you're asking a whole lot of questions in one question. Because as you know, a lot of our people came over as what they call slaves. I consider them captives because they took us and kidnapped us from people. So when you talk about the Rastafari movement, you're talking about everything that we were originally doing at home already, traveling from one part of the globe to the next. The same way if you move from the Midwest to Atlanta and you bring that culture from your neighborhood to this neighborhood and mix it in and tie it into what's going on with the politics of that reality and come up with who you are at that present time of reality. And so that's how I see Rastafari had originated in relation to the question of Africa or Jamaica. It's something that's already in us, and throughout the passage of time it begins to gain a following or a cultural setting as to where people can name it or mimic it in such a fashion. At the same time, it deals with a lot of politics. So you have Haile Selassie, who's crowned emperor of Ethiopia. There were people in Italy that wanted to take over his land, straight cut off his throat, your children's throat. And that's just how it was. You know what I'm saying? They would just come, kill, take our land for simple things like coffee, gold. You know, they would just wipe out the land. And so Emperor Haile Selassie was one of the few people of a melanin-dominant reality, meaning of black or brown skin origin. He was one of the only, if not the only ruler of an entire land at that time, as to where the Italians wanted to come and wipe him out. So there are a lot of politics that's around that. And people in Jamaica naturally were inspired by this. And once we start getting into Marcus Garvey, that's a whole another level. Because Marcus was simply stating that we should purchase our own boats and just roll up out here. I don't want to see why even be here, why even go through this nightmarish, torturous reality and adjust as we know we met when we can just roll out. Marcus, they say, met with the Ku Klux Klan. One good book to read is Philosophies and Opinions by Marcus Garvey. It was one paragraph in there that changed my reality where he talked about the whole Senate and the Congress was all black, as he remembered, until at one point in time, white folks woke up to the reality that they didn't want us to make decisions over them with such a powerful force. And so they set out to destroy us all, but they didn't want to do it publicly because it would create a reality that they didn't want to have to deal with. people would look at them as savage, so they would rather maintain the illusion of the law. That way they would kill us off slowly and infiltrate the office in such a way. See, what we don't know is that the first president of this landmass was a black man. They say it was General George Washington, but as we know politically, in order to have a general, you have to have a president to appoint a general in the military in the first place. So the first president of this landmass was a black man. And this is the type of reality that they stripped away from us, that when people go back and study their roots of who they are, where they come from, and they come across people such as Haile Selassie, also known as Ras Tafari or Marcus Garvey, it provides them with a whole nother level of inspiration. Naturally, with any type of power, you're going to have people that come from various movements to jump into it. Christianity, so they bring the likings of Christianity. Oh my God, he must be Jesus. You know, so you get these type of realities mixed in with any type of movement. Even Christianity itself, Islam, anything. You're always going to have people that want a piece of that power, that bring whatever they come from with them, whether good or bad. So this is where a lot of the misconceptions come in. So when I ask myself, how am I going to present a lecture, I realize that there are two ways, or a few ways that I can present it. I can talk about the misconceptions, I can talk about the facts, and then I can talk about my reality. So without getting off the point, I'll get briefly into my reality. At one point in time, I had not too much of an idea of what a Rasta was. Aside from the fact that I came up around people who existed in such a mind frame. So that guided my footsteps in a certain direction. As to where I found myself in Jamaica a few times. And I knew every time that I went to Jamaica that I didn't want to have a tourist experience. But I know that I was from concrete, from a place that was much different, but at the same time I was daring enough to go out amongst the land, amongst the jungle, amongst the hills, amongst the reef, amongst the ocean, and explore. And about the second or third time I went down there, I had heard about this cave. And this cave was supposed to be a sacred cave that only if you had a priest with you could you even enter into the cave. So through various connections, I managed to have someone guide me through the cave. And when I got into the cave, I looked up at the wall and there was a sculpture of Bob Marley's face, like printed into the wall, like chiseled. So I asked the person that was guiding me through the cave, how did this sculpture get up that high in the cave? Did somebody climb up there? I mean, how is that possible? He said, no man did that. So in my mind state at the time, I flagged it off like, okay. So we walking around the cave and there are lions, eagles, I mean all type of sculptures throughout the cave. And I'm asking him, how did these sculptures get in the cave? And he's saying to me, no man sculpted them. We come in here and there's always a new one every time we come in. So I'm like, okay. Now, upon entering into this cave, I had heard various stories. A woman named Nanny and the Maroon tribe, how they would flee from the British and go into these caves. And this particular cave was the home of a woman named Nanny, who was the legend of the land at the time. She was said to have stopped bullets when the British attempted to attack her. She could wave her hand and send their bullets back in the other direction. These are the legends. And a mermaid guarded the cave and things like this. So to make a long story short, they had this place in the cave called the bottomless pit, which was a mass of water where you go into and there's no bottom to it. They say it goes straight into the earth. So this is the part where amongst my tour of the cave, I was to be baptized in what was called the bottomless pit. When we hear Bob Marley sing the song, Redemption Song, and he said, oh pirates just they robbed by from the bottomless pit. They say that everybody who has eclipsed their journey has visited the bottomless pit, people of that land, such as Bob Marley. And I go into the bottomless pit. When I go into the bottomless pit, it's like a heavenly experience. I've told the story several times. For the sake of time, I'm attempting to condense the story. But basically, when I get into the bottomless pit, I could hear a hum. And it was like a vacuum, and it started sucking me down. And there was a point in the bottomless pit where I realized that I wasn't breathing and I didn't feel the need to breathe. And I wanted to just let go. And I realized at that moment that I had crossed the threshold as to where I could decide to either swim up or allow the vacuum to continue to suck me down. And when I first got in, the person that was with me asked the priest, what will happen if he goes in and doesn't come out? And the priest said, well, you know, it happens. So as I'm being sucked in, all this is passing through my mind, and I decided to swim back up. Now, needless to say, when I came back up, I was never the same. You know, after realizing what it was like to have the choice to cross over to the other side. And also in this trip, I had visited the mountains of Jamaica, 2 hours up where Bob Marley was born, and went to his tomb where his body is buried. And I went to the tomb of Peter Tosh. So in this, I began to have a personal experience with the culture that people sometimes refer to as Ras Tafari. So I want y'all to make note of that reality. There are misconceptions, there are facts, and then there are your personal experiences. So I did some formal research, again, that's misconceptions, facts, and your personal experiences. That will not only apply to Ras Tafari, but you can carry that over into any information or any religion that you study. So my experience with Ras Tafari has been a movement of searching to know self. I figured in order to master anything, in order to master this college course that you're taking right now, you gotta have some sense of identity. In order to do anything correctly, you gotta have a sense of identity. And that's what the Ras Tafari culture contributed to my reality, which was a sense of identity. So it caused me to expound on my ideas and study things like, now, this is where I want you to get your pen ready. Because I'm going to give you some of the things that the culture itself caused me to branch off into, which opened my mind up even further. And it's the reason why I have these lyrics up here. I want you to take note of these names. John Henry Clarke. John-Henrick, Clarke, just like Clarke Atlanta. Jewel Pookrum. Jewel, like the jewels that you wear. Pookrum, P-O-O-K-R-U-M. These are very, very important people that dedicated their time and research for the sake of your survival. And on the course of knowing self in terms of branching off from the culture of Ras Tafari into things relative, these people are very important. Marcus Garvey. Remember, Philosophies and Opinions by Marcus Garvey. Anthony Browder. B-R-O-W-D-E-R. He wrote a book called Contributions of the Nile Valley Civilization. Contributions of the Nile Valley Civilization. Very important information. Anthony Browder. Very powerful book that I definitely suggest everybody take the time out to read in your personal time. Here's another powerful pastor. When I went to a college called the Philadelphia College of Bible, and I studied basically to be a pastor. I studied beside pastors, with pastors, to be a pastor, I suppose. For me personally, again, it was me seeking those pieces to the puzzle in terms of my identity, in order for me to master everything I come in contact with. This person I wish I had by my side when I was there, because I felt very much alone being one of the only black students in the school. I would have loved to have had this pastor with me. His name is Ashaka Musa Barashingo. I'm going to spell that for you. First name, Ashaka. I-S-H-A-K-A-M-U-S-A. Ashaka Musa. Yes. I-S-H-A-K-A-M-U-S-A. Ashaka Musa. I-S-H-A-K-A-M-U-S-A. Y'all got that? Word. Barashingo. B-A-R-A-S-H-A-N-G-O. Let me spell it again. B-A-R-A-S-H-A-N-G-O. Barashingo. Another pastor after that is Pastor Ray Higgins. It's the reason why I'm giving y'all these people these names, these are powerful